Time to know. Chocolate paste. Fast snack. When there are only a few minutes left, this treat always helps out. A visit to a spa. Wrapping with the product is enjoyable and relaxing. Chocolate paste. Sweet, fragrant and viscose. It satisfies hunger and gives people endorphins, the hormones of good mood. How did the most beloved product come into being? Was the pasta invented for young children and old people who can't chew hard chocolate bars? Or is it food designed for astronauts? In fact, a chocolate paste was created with helping of summer heat. In 1946, the Italian Pietro Ferrero inherited from his father a small bakery in his hometown of Alba. It was the first post-war year. The impoverished Italians couldn't afford expensive treats. And Pietro found a way out. He came up with a cheap bar of gianduja, made of chocolate and nut crumbs, which instantly became popular. Soon the delicacy brought Ferrero fame and money, and his bakery turned into a confectioner's. And one day the mayor of Alba asked him to make several hundreds of gianduja by the day of the town. When the last bar was ready, Pietro finally exhaled with relief and lay down to rest. When he returned to the kitchen, he was speechless with horror. Hot Italian summer melted all the bars and they became like chocolate oil. Did the order fail? No! A new recipe! Baker Pietro took out some buns and called for helpers. Together they began to spread chocolate paste on the buns. The success of the sandwich was absolutely phenomenal. And the profit from the sale turned out to be higher than the confectioner could have imagined. A year later, Pietro Ferrero sold more than 6,000 pounds of the accidentally invented chocolate paste. 12 years later, his son, Michel, perfected the paste recipe and gave the sweet a new name: Nutella. Hard-working and resourceful, Pietro Ferrero became a real chocolate king. During his life, he made a fortune of $17 billion. Italy annually produces more than 500 million jars of Nutella. If you put them in a line, it could circle the globe. It's a real feat to give people small but such bright pleasures. Time to know. Slinky. Both children and adults like playing with this original spring. It can be metal or plastic, in one colour or like a rainbow. It calms the nerves, develops creative thinking and simply pleases the eye. The spring is called Slinky. How did the thing appear in our life and who created it? A bored office clerk may have started playing with a spring from an automatic pen. Yes, the discovery really happened at work, though it was rather because of awkwardness than rest and leisure. In 1943, Richard James, an engineer-mechanic of the Navy, experimented with springs. His task was to develop an ideal spring to make ship's components work in a storm. Richard was a little awkward and often dropped things. Once he accidentally hit the jar with spare parts. It fell off the shelf onto the table and a spring jumped out of it. Richard froze. The spring started walking on the table. It heated Richard's curiosity so much that for the rest of the day he tried to make springs of different sizes to walk. At home he shared the event with his wife Betty. But she wasn't impressed. But Richard tried to create a spring of such parameters that could easily walk. Finally, he got it. Even Betty was delighted. The toy was named by her. She looked up the Swedish word Slinky, which means windy. 2 years later, Richard released the first batch of Slinky and immediately sold it. The spring was worn like a bracelet, stretched like a garland, jumped over like a rope. In 1946, he and his wife opened the company James Industries, and only 4 years later they rolled in money and fame. Didn't the couple have such a happy ending? Unfortunately, no. It was the husband to be blamed. Richard James became religious. He left his family and went to Bolivia to become a missionary. The company no longer interested him, but Betty was not lost and headed it. She achieved success. In 2001, her name entered the Hall of Fame. Alas, Richard didn't live to that point. He died 14 years after moving to Bolivia. The last decisions of Richard James can be called awkward, but thanks to this trait of his, the hit toy Slinky accidentally fell into his hands. Time to know. Vaseline. To protect metal from corrosion, to heal a wound, to make impregnation for overalls, use petroleum jelly. A transparent substance in a small tube is useful for a worker, a doctor and a tailor, and for an ordinary person. For sure you've got Vaseline in your medicine cabinet. Cosmetologists must have created Vaseline, you will say, as they care most of all for the tenderness of our skin. Or it may have been caring mothers who wanted to protect their children from burns and wounds from toy wars. In fact, the history of Vaseline was accidentally started by workers, and they didn't even take money for that. 1859, the oil boom in the US. Chemist Robert Chesebra studied the combustible substance. He was so fond of experiments that he constantly got burns. Once he went into the refinery to obtain new samples. Talking to the workers, Chesebra suddenly noticed that some of them collected sticky stuff from drilling rigs to cover up their wounds. "What are you doing?" asked Chesebra. "It's an excellent remedy for burns, try it." The scientist could have just laughed at the suggestion, and he really doubted the results, but all the same he took samples of the substance. Studying the sticky mixture, he found in it healing components. Chesebra smeared his burns with a thick layer, and he was amazed. Soon they healed, leaving almost invisible scars. On the 14th of May 1870, Robert launched the life-giving ointment in production, but it was avoided in the pharmacy because the label, oil jelly, embarrassed the customers. Agree it wasn't the best choice. The chemist renamed the ointment into Vaseline water plus olive oil in Greek. And it paid off. Doctors treated skin with Vaseline. Actresses painted tears with it. Swimmers put it on their skin before a swim. How had the world lived without it? In 1878, Chesebra patented the Vaseline trademark. Today, the rights to it belong to Unilever. It produces a line of skincare products under the brand. Chesebra not only became famous and wealthy, he was knighted in 1883. At the knighting ceremony, Queen Victoria admitted that she used Vaseline every day. What else could the inventor dream of? Maybe Robert Chesebra should have visited the production more often to communicate with the workers. Who knows how many more discoveries could be made, thanks to their bright but modest minds. Time to know. Modelling clay. Do you know how to pass the time on a rainy day? There's a fascinating way. It can help to make any shape and even create an animated film. Its name is modelling clay. It was invented by the father of a large family, but not in order to engage his children and have the opportunity to take a nap, and not even to calm his nerves tortured by the constant noise. So what for? For the sake of art, although his children also took part. William Harbut was a teacher at an art school. He was very fond of his job, but one problem bothered him. The clay works made by the children dried up too soon. Therefore, they needed to sculpt quickly and at once. The next day, nothing could be fixed. Therefore, in 1897, William decided to try changing the composition of clay. And he managed to do it. Harbut mixed clay with wax and animal fats. The result surprised even him. Not only did the new substance not dry up, it turned out to be very flexible and plastic. Easily scraped off hands and surfaces. Easily took any form. First of all, he brought the plastic, non-drying substance home. William had as many as 6 children. They highly appreciated the clay. Although at that time it was a grey, unattractive colour. The house was filled with clay houses, cars and animals. In 1900, Harbut opened his own factory. By that time, he had learned to produce coloured clay. His children were delighted. Modelling clay won the hearts of both children and professional artists. Salvador Dali himself grew up using it. He created clay models before painting a picture. But what happened to William Harbut? His life was like clay. It also turned from grey into colour. In order for everyone to know about the exciting invention, he travelled the whole world. William was also a talented artist, and thanks to the clay he became popular. Queen Victoria herself ordered her portrait from William. So the father of the large family became a famous inventor and artist. And let them say that the most important goals must be achieved before having a family. Now we know that children are an additional stimulus to realize our ambitions.